Everyone, it's Emily Williams-Knight with the TRA, and I'm here today with Kelsey, who I know we've talked so much about, you've seen throughout her time here. We want to use tonight really as a celebration and to review the legislative really success that we had this session. I can't tell you how proud I am, and we walk through what we've accomplished under Kelsey's leadership. I think you'll agree. And there's a lot here that's going to impact your business, so I'm hoping you can get a cup of coffee, a glass of wine, a glass of beer, whatever you prefer, and watch us walk through these bills. And so, Kelsey, maybe just a summary of the session to kick it off.
Yeah, so as y'all know, the legislative session ended officially on Memorial Day, so this past Monday. It really ended with quite a bang, I would say. The Sunday night before that was really the last day to finally pass legislation. They reserved the last day for technical corrections and ceremonies and that sort of thing. And Sunday night, there was a pretty high-profile elections bill that was up on the calendar. And because of the sort of controversy surrounding that bill, enough House Democrats actually left the chamber with a couple hours left to go in the deliberations, and that caused the House to lose its quorum, and so they couldn't carry on any more business. And so what normally goes all the way until midnight, they pass as many bills as they can before that deadline, ended pretty abruptly around 10:30 p.m. With basically a walkout.
For sure.
Yes, and so...
And we'll talk about one of our bills that sort of got stuck in that.
Yes, was a victim to that dramatic ending. But really what that means for us is we have more session to look forward to. We already knew there was going to be a special session this fall for redistricting, which is when the legislators get together and draw the new legislative maps for the next decade in theory. As y'all know, the census was delayed because of COVID, and that in turn has delayed this redistricting process. So we already knew there was going to be a special session in the fall. Governor Abbott has also indicated that he will put on that agenda basically the budgeting process to figure out how some of those COVID relief dollars that Texas received under the American Rescue Plan Act, how that money will be spent. And of course, that's an issue that we'll be paying close attention to. Absolutely. So we already knew that was coming in the fall, but really Sunday's dramatic ending means that we are also going to have a special session this summer. Estimates, the best guess is probably late June, July, sometime like that for that special.
Couple weeks, yeah.
And we will be paying close attention to that because one of our bills that got caught up in all of this dramatic ending may very well be part of that agenda for the summer.
That's what we're going to work hard to do.
Yes. Yeah. So big dramatic ending. That's kind of the big picture where things ended up. But for us, I think the key thing is really that we were able to accomplish so much of what we set out to do. And
maybe the most legislation we've ever passed.
Certainly as far as I know. Most folks came into this legislative session because of the pandemic, because of Winter Storm Uri, and said, we're really going to play defense this session. We're not going to try to pass a lot of legislation. And TRA took the opposite approach.
We're going to go for it all. There's a lot of goodwill right now, and we're going to get things official for life.
Yeah, a lot of goodwill and a lot of challenges. I mean, obviously this industry has had an incredibly difficult, 15, 16 months now. And Emily and I agreed early on that we really needed to take full advantage of this session and get as many wins as we could while we had the chance. Because as y'all know, the regular session is only every other year for about 6 months. So you've really got to jump in with both feet when you have that opportunity. And that's exactly what we did. And I think the results really speak for themselves.
And I think what I'd love to do is just walk through, because I think there's so much coming at our operators that if we can just take a moment to walk through each of the bills that have actually passed or have passed and now they're waiting to be signed. I'll start with the most popular you all should be aware of, which is alcohol to go. And just to be really clear with people, these are not passing everywhere in the country. So there were 32 states that had an executive order, but many are getting hung up. And so the fact that Texas now has this ability, and if you read the legislation, it's pretty favorable, right? I mean, really a restaurant has this ability now to generate a whole new revenue stream. And what's really important it was HB 1024, is that you read below on TABC compliance. So you need to make sure you have the right licenses to be doing this. Most of you are. If not, read below and make sure that this is going to be part of something what you can do going forward. And so that is now law. And as you know, we were at the signing, and it's super exciting. And if it's not part of your mix today, I would argue you want to think about how to integrate the ability to do this, because it is such a high margin and a great way to give the customer an experience. So it's sort of, to me, a win for everyone.
I think that's right. I mean, it really was part of how we got through this pandemic as an industry, but it also, you needed an extra margarita to go some days. But it also is how we move into the future, right? We know to-go sales are going to continue to be incredibly important. There's no putting that genie back in the bottle for consumers. They want that option.
We've seen off-premise stay consistent as restaurants have opened. So.
Absolutely. So as Emily said, if it's not something that you've been utilizing, really consider it. You basically just need to make sure you have 2 licenses, either a mixed beverage or a private club, plus that food and beverage certificate. And then there's some specific rules about kind of sealing the beverage. But the good news is you do keep the ability to make your cocktails on site and sell those to your consumers. So as Emily said, read below for the details, but we really wrote it as kind of streamlined and as easy for operators to follow as possible. So that's an exciting win for sure. And that's one that is already in effect because Governor Abbott signed it very early in
one
the
of the
process.
first. One of the first.
Absolutely.
And that sort of goes with the other executive order we secured, which was the ability for you all to sell bulk goods. We saw very clearly in the pandemic that if restaurants had not stepped up to provide some of those goods, that people were going to go without food or needed supplies. And so
the great toilet paper shortage of 2020.
Yeah, I think we still have reams of toilet paper at my house because my family took it
so seriously.
Yeah, that's for the best.
Stockpiling is
not a bad thing. HB 1276, and I think this is another one that I think people are not really thinking holistically about how to make it part of your world. But I think the best way to sum this up was Skeeter Miller from Countyland Barbecue testifying, and he said, I just want to be able to offer a plate of barbecue, some drinks to go, and some toilet paper, right? Now you can do that. I don't want to underestimate this because I think it's also going to help restaurants position themselves in the future to be part of that food supply chain in a different way. So we're talking nationally on bills with different legislators about how to get SNAP benefits to restaurants, right? How to be able to serve a wider audience. And then if you can provide them with more than just a prepared meal, you're going to be in great shape. And so please make sure you look below to see the link on what the context of this bill is. But we've preserved that ability that you use to create revenue when you needed it most. That is now law. And so I want to make sure you don't miss that, because I think it can be a big part of how you deal with a consumer that wants your experience in whatever way they want it, when they want it. Now you can make that part of it.
Absolutely. And this is another bill where we worked closely with the legislature to make the requirements on restaurants as simple and streamlined as possible. So, eliminating unnecessary labeling requirements and licensure requirements. Yeah. You don't have to go get a second license. That's really where our advocacy efforts, I think, pay off. And as Emily said, it's about moving into the future, and it's about being innovative. I mean, we've seen restaurants do cooking demonstrations at home where you come and you pick up the box of ingredients and go home and do a cooking class, raw meat, family meal kits for the week. I mean, those lines of kind of what a restaurant is are changing, and the lines are getting blurred, and that creates new opportunities for revenue for our members.
Yeah. So those two I think are just great, right? For you to be able to be more flexible in your business model. Another one we'll just touch real quickly was PPP tax deductibility. You all know that Texas, I'm going to just say it, we led the way federally to get that passed, and so it wasn't taxed. And then within 48 hours, learned that because of the Texas Constitution, that you would be charged sort of the margin or franchise tax on those dollars. That also passed, and Kelsey, very wisely, for many of you, you're benefiting from the restaurant revitalization funds, and that was written in, so there'll be no tax charged on that as well. To touch that real quick, because I'm getting a lot of emails about it, we're working very hard to replenish that. It's about, in my opinion, 50 billion short of what we need. And we didn't even get through groups outside the priority. So just realize that that is something we're also working on to make sure you can benefit. But there will be no tax charged on that money, which I think is huge. And I don't want to underestimate that impact, because many states are using this as a revenue source, and they're going back and taxing those dollars on those small businesses, which will not happen in Texas.
Absolutely. And that's another bill that Governor Abbott signed quickly. I think it was actually his first official
It
signing
was.
ceremony.
It was.
Emily and I got to attend.
It was cool.
So yeah, that's real dollars that you get to keep in your pocket to spend to really jumpstart your business again. So that's a great win.
Maybe go to third-party delivery.
Sure.
I think this is one we haven't talked about in a while, but I know how hard you worked on it.
This one's kind of my baby. So SB 911, 911, it's an easy number to remember, is our third-party transparency bill. And as y'all remember, we worked with all of the major third-party delivery companies, gosh, for almost a year now, just figuring out how can we partner, how can we work together so that restaurants can actually benefit from third-party delivery sales. We have heard from so many of you that you need that source of revenue, but it's not profitable for you with the current setup and the current kind of environment that third-party delivery companies utilize. And so Anna and her team have of course tackled this from the partnerships route, which is important as well. You have many benefits to being a TRA member. Advocacy is obviously just one.
That's right.
But our bill, our bill really takes that a step further and puts requirements in law to ensure that you have the transparency and frankly the ability to make your own decisions about what's best for your business. So saying things like a third-party delivery company cannot charge you any fees, any money that you have not agreed to in advance in writing, right? That giving you that control over what you're signing up for and what you're not. Putting in law that if you as a restaurant tell a third-party delivery company, I do not want to be listed on your service, they have 10 days to honor that request and take you off. And by the way, if a third-party delivery company violates any of the bill's protections, you have an actual remedy now. You could actually go to court and sue them and get an injunction to stop them from taking advantage of your business. So, is it perfect? Probably not. It is a huge step forward from where we are today. And it's exciting because we're now seeing other states actually look to this bill as a kind of model legislation. And so I'm excited to kind of see Texas lead the way once again.
Absolutely. And that transparency piece really was always the issue, right?
Yep.
The fees, I think in some cases, those fees will start to flatten out as the market starts to, right? As delivery becomes a huge part of your business model. But the idea that you were being represented without your knowledge and then couldn't really enforce that, we heard over and over that was a major challenge. And I know we've been asked, okay, why did we cap fees? In Texas, as I've been told multiple times, a very pro-business, business-friendly state, that's not something that was going to happen. And so for us, it was what could we do to give the most protection to you? And we'll put down below, too, a couple of the key points of the delivery bill to make sure you know your rights now as a business owner, as the governor, will sign this in the next couple weeks.
Yeah, and we're planning some more education as well around this topic, kind of a know your rights when it comes to third-party delivery, know your options. So stay tuned for more on this because, again, this is a convenience and an option that consumers want, and it's not going away as the pandemic recedes. So it's all about how do you leverage these opportunities to get the best bang for your buck as a business in Texas.
Let's do a liability, because another huge win that we tried to get at the federal level didn't come through for us, and so right away worked with, I think, some really key folks here, and SB 6 is officially passed, and I think huge, and the governor signed it.
Yeah, it hasn't been signed yet. Emily's projecting into the future, but it's coming for sure.
He will sign it.
He will. This is actually one that Governor Abbott designated as an emergency item during this session, which means that it got fast-tracked and it got prioritized, which was great. So it passed in the final, I want to say, week of session.
Yeah.
And it is a strong bill that really protects the good actors and incentivizes people to follow the guidance, whether that's CDC guidance, state of Texas guidance, or local guidance. One of the key things in the bill is it recognized that during the pandemic, you were being inundated with often conflicting recommendations and guidance. And so that's where it's important to have that protection that as long as you followed some kind of guidance in good faith, you were going to be protected. You don't have to worry about frivolous lawsuits.
And that's the risk, right?
Yeah.
It's not that we can track, causation of COVID is so hard, but you can't have lawyers lining up to sue your business because you can't afford to defend yourself.
That's
Small
exactly
businesses can't.
right. That's exactly right. Is ensuring you don't even have to take that first step of defending yourself when you need every penny you've earned over the past year to really get your business back on track. So that's a bill we worked with a large coalition of businesses on.
It's great.
Some great legal minds really took control of that, and we look forward to Governor Abbott signing it soon.
Yeah, absolutely. I can't say enough about that bill and the next one we'll talk about on the coalition front.
Yes.
Is that our ability to partner as the association and work across so many different business and industry groups, I think made a huge difference this session.
Absolutely. It really amplified our voice because it helped us, we could use our limited resources to really focus on those restaurant-specific bills that we were talking about, while at the same time achieving these other objectives that help our restaurants too. So,
there lots of collaboration. And that, I'll go next really to the SB 14, which is what Kelsey talked about earlier, which is regulatory consistency, right? So we don't have a patchwork of guidelines across the state. And that got caught up in the politics of Sunday. But as Kelsey indicated, every intention for us with our coalition to go forward and make this part of a special session, because we really believe this is something that we have to do. As much as it was a very difficult, even through the process, we had a lot of people working against us.
Yeah, this is one, unfortunately, that is a high profile issue. It was designated as SB 14, which kind of tells you that it was prioritized by Lieutenant Governor Patrick, who's been a real champion of restaurants throughout this crisis. But sometimes with that, designation, you get more attention from people who support you and people who
don't support you.
And that happened here. But the good news is this bill has come a long way. Many of y'all will recall it was filed last session as well, passed out of the Senate quickly, and then just completely blew up and died in the House and really kind of
went down in a pretty severe way.
Yes, and so this session we were able to avoid that. We got it all the way through the Senate quickly, all the way through the House. It actually passed in both chambers. The problem was different versions passed in both chambers, and so that requires the House and the Senate to come together to have a compromise version and to have that compromise version passed one final time in both chambers. We got that done in the Senate, and our House vote didn't happen because of that walkout that we talked about earlier. So the good news is this issue has come a long way. We were able to get bipartisan support, which was key.
Almost unheard of, frankly.
Yes, almost unheard of on an issue like this. And we were really able to explain to folks that this isn't a political issue. It's really about helping our small, medium, large-sized businesses across Texas. We have 254 counties, thousands of cities. It is impossible for you as a business operator to follow different rules on everything from leave, benefits, scheduling, criminal background checks.
We saw even just in the pandemic what that was like early on before we had.
Absolutely.
It was crazy.
So it's really not a partisan issue. It's about saying, where should these decisions be made? We feel strongly they should be made at the state and the federal level, so that you have one set of predictable rules. You know what's required of you.
Absolutely.
And you don't waste time trying to figure out what every different city is doing on every different issue, because that creates a huge compliance cost and a huge regulatory burden when you, again, need to be spending that time and those limited resources rebuilding your business. So as Emily said, that issue is not going away. No. It died this session, but I was joking with Anna earlier. It's going to be a zombie. It's gonna come back.
Yeah.
Really.
I think there's enough energy, and I think that as much as Sunday was so disappointing, and I remember getting your text, and it was sort of like, okay, well then we're just going to go to the new field and play the game again. And so just know that we're not dropping this one.
Absolutely.
And we'll keep pushing it forward. Another one that passed, HB 7, another priority. And again, this, if you just think about the impact of unemployment costs and what could actually come out of we had 750,000 employees on the sidelines at the peak of the pandemic out of 1.3 million. Just think about that math. And so maybe Kelsey walked through the unemployment tax relief. Again, it's something you're probably not thinking about as a benefit, but could have gone disastrously wrong in the other direction.
Absolutely. This is another one that really results in dollars staying in your pocket. As you all know, when someone files an unemployment insurance claim, that is paid out of essentially unemployment insurance trust fund. And that fund was, as you can imagine, completely exhausted and depleted as a result of all the unemployment claims that came because of the pandemic. And to replenish that fund, we rely on taxes paid by our businesses, the unemployment taxes that you all pay. this bill really ensures that you don't see a dramatic increase in that unemployment tax rate, because it essentially uses bonds and other financing authority to essentially stretch out the time during which we can replenish that fund. So it's kind of technical. It's kind of a sleeper bill, but it results in huge savings that you obviously weren't even, planning to see a increase in your unemployment tax
rate. And I was on with
now.
a couple of CEOs yesterday, and I was shocked that they are actually fighting against bills to increase those taxes.
In other states. Yeah.
So, I mean, I think it just reminds me of how fortunate we are in so many ways here in Texas that we have such a supportive legislature when it comes to business, especially small businesses.
Absolutely. Well, and to that end, this is another one that Governor Abbott has already signed, bipartisan support in both chambers, and it really is key just to take one more scary bad thing that could have happened off the table. So once again, we can get back to a positive place, a place of growth and stability for the industry.
And then sort of last, and I put this last for a reason, which is HB 3411. That was the mixed beverage tax that, and this really started back in April of the pandemic. And so when the first dollars started to come out federally, we wanted a piece of those.
Yep.
And we put, I think, a brilliant proposal together. We wanted to set up a grant. I think the governor's office communicated directly. They took a very serious look at that.
Mm-hmm.
But at that point, every small business was hurting, right? Pretty much. And so as we got reopened May 1st, and started that reopening process, unlike so many parts of the country, it was, do we need to put this there now, or can we hold this money, right, from the federal government and decide the best way? Schools, all sorts of choices they have to make. This was our way of creating a mechanism for the legislature to help provide money or keep funding back or dollars really in restaurants' pockets. And so we started with, could every consumer pay 6 cents on a drink in order to help create a grant fund of about $300 million to help restaurants? And then it was, well, we're not going to really probably get a bill that will pass doing that. Okay, what if we just froze the mixed beverage, which is what this bill was, for 2 years? It was 24 months. Let's have the state eat some of this to keep money in your pocket. It was about $120 million, right?
I thought it was more like $200 million, but
okay, we're gonna go $200 million. So $200 million, and two things. One, we got a hearing, which how many bills don't get a hearing?
With $200 million fiscal notes, very few get a hearing.
So,
yes,
most do not. We had a great member testify, and it was very eye-opening because I know the committee was unaware of not only the pain the sector had gone through, but now, as you all know, it's labor costs, it's product costs, right? I mean, everything is still being poured onto you, and yet you fed people, you maintained your businesses, and so we want some type of relief. What Kelsey mentioned is in the special session, those American Rescue Funds are still sitting there, and we are in line to benefit from those funds, and we will not stop making the case. This was a way for us to intentionally put on the map to say we need help, and we want a piece of this money, and the best way we think we can do that is through a grant program,
right?
And there's lots of ways to structure it. So this may have not gone anywhere. We didn't think it would probably go anywhere with that kind of fiscal note. However, we've made the case that we need to have a grant program, and I think even though we've reopened, we still have so many businesses that are struggling because of how many months of lost revenue and increasing costs.
Yeah.
So we've taken this now, and we're talking with the legislature and now talking with the governor's office again about how we can get a piece of that money when they decide how they're going to allocate it.
That's exactly right. This was a win. It was just a different kind of win. It was really about setting the stage, planting the seed for future asks, and for an ongoing discussion about what financial relief should be available to businesses that were required to close by the government. And we always have to kind of reiterate that point.
Yes.
And so that's an ongoing conversation, as Emily mentioned. There's obviously a lot of need because it's not just, the private sector, but as Emily mentioned, it's schools, it's hospitals, it's our healthcare system, child care. But we're going to keep telling our story, as Emily said, and we think it's a compelling one. And this bill really allowed us to get in front of key legislators, remind them what we've been through, remind them what we continue to face, so that when we come back with a future ask, that seed has been planted and we're more successful.
Yeah, and my summary of this is this session went great, and I'm really, and I say this to Kelsey a lot, but I'm so proud of what she accomplished. I think the pandemic allowed us to build relationships that I know people are always surprised that I did not have when I arrived. And yet we navigated through the Capitol, I think, with such grace and such collaboration that people wanted to lean in to help. And I think that's really, as we move the TRA forward, it's just critical that we tell our story, that our members did an amazing job testifying, and we brought them in every time, because hearing from an operator that struggled, and talks about their loss versus Kelsey or I doing that is just so much more powerful. So my summary really is that we've set a great foundation for the recovery of our sector. We've put a lot of the financial risk off the table for you, and now we're going to go on and tackle, obviously, if we can get a grant program federally. I'm working really hard to try to get that fund re-energized. I think we've got a very good chance. I think it could be a couple of weeks, but I do feel really good about that. And then in the meantime, working on issues like supply chain and labor, and what we can be doing, like what we launched this week with the Workforce Commission, which is giving you those access codes to get someone ServSafe certified right away and get them in, right? And trying to strip out all that burdensome cost and process for you, giving you the training videos that help you know how to do best practice now. All those things are what we're going to do this summer to help you be better operators with what's changed in your world, and then keep our eye on that special session to see how we might be able to benefit.
Absolutely. It was a great session, and it didn't happen by accident. It happened because TRA was hard at work for the past 15 months. But even more importantly, it was because y'all did such a great job engaging. We never take your trust and your efforts for granted. We know you've had an incredibly difficult year and a half. And I'm always just so appreciative of every time we ask y'all to email your legislators or participate in a survey or read our, weekly
emails. Watch this video.
Yes. It's not lost on us that y'all have so many demands on your plate, and yet you entrust us with that time and those efforts. And I can tell you, it made a huge difference. SB 14 wouldn't have gotten as far as it did without that last minute activation.
Hundreds of you responded.
Yes, hundreds, quickly. I mean, many of these bills would not have passed without our leaders coming to testify, as Emily said, or writing their legislators. It made a huge difference, and it took all of those efforts together to get us to where we're at, and more importantly, to propel us into the future, which I'm excited about.
And I'll just add one, which is the amicus brief we just signed on to.
Yes.
Because one of the things we haven't talked about in a long time is business interruption, and how many of you are sitting on those policies that never paid out. And so there's many of these cases moving through the courts, and TRA is partnering with the National Restaurant Association Law Center and a restaurant to actually file an amicus brief sort of laying out why we believe these policies should pay out. So no action for you, but just know that is an issue that is not yet resolved, and I don't think will be for quite some time. And we're watching and tracking those pieces of legislation that may benefit us here in Texas across the country, and we'll continue to do that for you through the fall.
Absolutely. I think that's just an example of, again, being a TRA member, you get the federal advocacy, you get the legal support, you get the state advocacy, you get the local on the ground, when there's a curfew or some issue we need to address locally. Right. And it's going to take all those pieces together to get us through this pandemic in a stronger place than we were even beforehand.
So thank you. Thank you for being a member. Thank you to Kelsey. Just the best partner I could have ever asked for. Again, I'm really proud. And I hope that you've watched this, you see the benefit. And as always, if any of this legislation is confusing to you or you don't understand how to implement, you just need to reach out and we'll be helpful. And again, we'll start doing more training on all of these as they become law, and make sure you're prepared and ready to go. Absolutely. And that's all for now.
Thank y'all.
Thank you. Have a good night.